This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Today, we're going to take a look at cards that let you tutor up artifacts. In Magic, a tutor is a card that lets you search your library for one or more cards and then put that card somewhere else. Generally, in your hand, on top of your library, on the battlefield, or in your graveyard. That type of effect tends to be quite powerful, especially when reasonably costed. Tutors can do things like search up the best card in your deck, search up a combo piece, or a situational card that is good against a particular opponent. To be eligible for this list, a card had to be a tutor, and it had to specifically mention artifacts. In all, there were 47 cards eligible for the list, and in this video, we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like Grand Prix. Alright, let's take a look at the top 10 cards that can tutor up artifacts. At number 10, it is Kuldotha Forgemaster. This artifact creature is a 5-mana 3/5. You can tap it and sacrifice 3 artifacts to search your library for an artifact and put it directly on the battlefield. So the setup here is pretty real, but being able to cheat something directly onto the board is a very powerful thing. When we're talking about a tutor that sticks something directly on the battlefield, it tends to usually be used to put something very scary into play. The Forgemaster has gained all of its points in Mud decks in Legacy and Vintage. These are decks that are all about making lots of mana and casting powerful artifacts with it. The Forgemaster gives you an alternate way to get some of those scary artifacts into play, like Sundering Titan or Blightsteel Colossus, 2 cards that are very difficult to beat if they come down early. The Forgemaster hasn't gained any points since 2021, and it may slip off the list in the long run. At number 9, it is Saihi Rai. This 3 loyalty planeswalker costs 1 generic, a blue, and a red. She makes this list by virtue of her -7, which lets you tutor up 3 artifacts with different names and put them on the battlefield. She also comes with a +1 that lets you scry 1 and do 1 to your opponent, and a -2 that lets you make a temporary token copy of an artifact or creature. She gained all of her points in the Standard of 2017, where she famously teamed up with Felidar Guardian to create a turn 4 combo that immediately won the game. You would play the Guardian on turn 4, then use Sahili's -2 to copy the Guardian, at which point you'd get a new copy, which would then blink Sahili, allowing her to use her -2 again, and you would do this until you had lethal damage. The combo infamously went unnoticed by Magic R&D, and it resulted in the Guardian getting banned out of the format very quickly, as the deck was simply too good for Standard. The Guardian is also banned in Pioneer, so she can't really gain points there, and like the Forgemaster, Saihi Rai may not be on the list for much longer. At number 8, it is Whir of Invention. This instant costs X and 3 blue, and it lets you tutor up an artifact with mana value equal to X or less and put it directly on the battlefield. It also happens to come with Improvise, which means you can tap your artifacts to help pay for it, with each of them contributing 1 generic mana. This means you can get X pretty darn high if you want to, especially in an artifact deck, and obviously if you're playing the Whir, you are. It has gained all of its points in Modern. Initially, it was played in Lantern control decks, which are artifact-based prison decks. It can help you search up prison lock pieces like Ensnaring Bridge. More recently, it's been played in Urza decks, which combine Urza Lord High Artificer with the flexibility of Whir of Invention to help you find artifacts exactly when you need them. These decks often also feature the combo win condition of Thopter Foundry and Sword of the Meek. With those 2 cards in play, you can gain 1 life and make a 1/1 Thopter for every 1 mana you have every turn, since the sword comes back every time you make one of these 1/1s. If Urza also happens to be in play, you can just go infinite. The deck also has a rather large toolbox of hate cards, and the Whir can help you find those silver bullets. So far, in 2023, Whir of Invention doesn't have any points, but I do think it's fairly likely to gain at least a few more points in the future. At number 7, it is Trinket Mage. So far, the tutors we've looked at have been pretty broad, capable of grabbing any artifact. That isn't true for Trinket Mage, which is a 3-mana 2/2 with an Enter the Battlefield ability that grabs you a 1 mana or less artifact from your deck. While that is restrictive, that still makes this into a 3-mana 2/2 that draws you a card, and in the right deck, it has access to some very powerful things. While it only saw a little bit of play in Block and Standard, it's done a lot of work in Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, which makes sense. These formats have larger card pools and thus also feature more cheap artifacts that are worth searching up. In Modern, its points have come in Tron and Amulet Titan decks. Tron decks look to get 3 Tron lands in play as quickly as possible, and the Mage can grab you Expedition Map, which can help you find those lands. The deck also tends to run singleton copies of Chalice of the Void and Engineered Explosives, which the Mage can also grab. Amulet Titan decks are reliant on getting Amulet of Vigor in play, and Trinket Mage helps make that easier. In Legacy, it used to see a lot of play in decks using Sensei's Divining Top, but since that card is banned now, it's seeing a lot less play there. And lastly, in Vintage, Trinket Mage can grab things as powerful as Black Lotus, in addition to being good in all of the artifact-based combo decks. It looks well positioned to keep gaining points. At number 6, it is Enlightened Tutor. This instant costs 1 white mana and can tutor up either an artifact or enchantment and put it on top of your library. It has helped power combo decks that are reliant on cards with these particular types, since it can effectively be additional copies of all of your combo pieces. For example, in Standard it could search up Opalescence, which would animate all of your enchantments. The tutor was especially nice there, because the deck also had lots of other enchantments too. In multiple formats, it's been used to grab the powerful Oath of Druids, and in Legacy, it's been used to search up both halves of the Painter Grindstone combo. It is still seeing play in Legacy right now, and it's likely to move even higher up on this list with time. At number 5, it is Nahiri the Harbinger. This 4 loyalty planeswalker costs 2 generic, a red, and a white, and she makes this list thanks to her ultimate, a -8 that lets you tutor up an artifact or creature and put it directly on the battlefield. It gains haste until end of turn, and then returns to your hand at the end of that turn. She also has a +2 that lets you discard a card and draw a card, and a -2 that exiles an enchantment, tapped creature, or tapped artifact. She was played in a lot of different standard decks, but Mardu Vehicles is where she was played the most. Vehicles themselves are actually a pretty big part of why she was played so much in Standard, because she could exile the problematic ones. She's seen play in Modern too, most frequently in Jeskai control decks, which usually run something pretty spicy to search up with her ultimate, like Emrakul the Eon's Torn. She's also been played in Pioneer Niv Mizzet Reborn decks, where she can be a card that Niv can hit with its Enter the Battlefield ability, and if she comes down before Niv, she can potentially search him up with her ultimate. She's still gaining a few points here and there in Pioneer, but I don't see her gaining a ton of points in the future. At number 4, it is Goblin Engineer. It's a 2-mana 1/2 that lets you tutor up an artifact and put it into your graveyard. You can also pay 1 and sacrifice an artifact to reanimate an artifact with a mana value of 3 or less. The Engineer is from Modern Horizons, and that means it was never legal in formats like Standard or Pioneer, but it's made the most of its legality in Modern and the Eternal formats, and like many cards on the list, it's seeing play primarily as a way to search up cheap artifacts that are part of powerful combos. In Modern, this includes the aforementioned Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek combo. One of the great things about Goblin Engineer in this combo is that for this one to go off, you really only need the Foundry in play, so you can even sacrifice a Sword of the Meek in play to get back a Foundry you put in your graveyard. More recently, it's been played alongside Tameshi Reality Sculptor in a deck that specializes in constantly bringing back Lotus Bloom with Tameshi's ability. Obviously, the Engineer is great for getting that bloom into the graveyard. In Legacy, it's largely been used to set up the Painter Servant Grindstone combo. And it even sees play in Vintage, which features a slew of powerful artifacts the Engineer can search up, including the Time Vault Key combo, which allows you to take infinite turns. So, yeah, the Engineer is very well positioned to keep gaining points in the 3 formats it's legal in, as it is one of the most powerful ways to set up artifact-based combos, especially if they use the graveyard. That said, the 3 cards in front of it are also all heavily played, so number 4 might just be the best Goblin Engineer can ever do. At number 3, it is Inventors Fair. This legendary land can tap for colorless mana, and it gains you 1 life during your upkeep if you have 3 or more artifacts in play. You can also pay 4 generic, tap it, and sacrifice it to tutor up an artifact and put it into your hand. You can only use that ability if you have 3 or more artifacts in play. Anytime you have a land that has an ability that can make a real impact in the late game, it feels like a great deal, since lands can produce mana for you. And Inventors Fair can do that just like any other land in the early stages of the game. So the fact that this can gain you a few life and then tutor up something really powerful makes you feel like you're getting some serious extra value with very little cost associated with it. It didn't see much play in Standard, but it's made up for that by gaining a lot of points in Modern, Legacy, and Vintage. Unsurprisingly, it's played in artifact-heavy decks in all 3 of the formats, where it can help assemble a variety of combos that we've already covered in the video, like Thopter Sword, Painter Servant Grindstone, and Time Vault Key. It's going to keep gaining points in the future. At number 2, it is Urzas Saga. This is both a saga and a land, so it doesn't cost any mana, making it kind of insane. It makes it on this list because of Chapter 3, which lets you tutor up a 0 or 1 mana artifact and put it on the battlefield. Chapter 1 allows it to tap for colorless mana. Chapter 2 gives you the ability to churn out constructs that get +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So, yeah. Not much of a surprise that this is insanely powerful, as it can work just like a normal land, but can also add to the board with chapters 2 and 3. It's another card that was printed in a Modern Horizons set, so the only 60 card formats it's legal in are Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, but it has quickly become a key card in all 3 formats. Each of these formats already had powerful artifact decks before Urzas Saga, and the Saga slotted right into those decks and made them much, much better. Those decks also all have really great cheap artifacts to tutor up, and can make the construct tokens absolutely massive. Urzas Saga, barring a ban, is going to continue to rapidly gain points. However, it will probably never catch the number 1 card on the list, which at this point you've probably guessed is Tinker. As an additional cost to cast this 3 mana sorcery, you have to sacrifice an artifact. When you do, you get to tutor up an artifact and put it directly into play. Obviously, this is obscenely powerful because it can allow you to put super overpowered artifacts into play in the extreme early game. It's so powerful that it's banned in Legacy and Commander and restricted in Vintage, and in the past it was also banned in Extended. Despite having all these limitations placed on it, to the point that it's only legal as a 1-of in Magic's most powerful format, Tinker still has a massive score as a result of the fact that most blue decks in Vintage run the 1 copy they are allowed so that they can have the potential to cheat a huge artifact into play in the early game, with Sphinx of the Steel Wind the most common thing to put into play these days. That creature's large body and protection makes it incredibly difficult to deal with, even in a format as powerful as Vintage. Tinker is going to keep gaining points in the format, and I think in the long run it will be able to hold off Urzas Saga. So, those are the top 10 artifact tutors in Magic. If you're interested in searching your library for some artifacts, check out the description, where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you enjoy this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to catch up on past videos, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. And lastly, if you want to go the extra mile in supporting me and the channel, you can do that by becoming a channel member or a patron. You can find ways to do those things in the description. Thanks for watching.